Chapter 371 Walking into a Trap. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 1 month later, the economic woes of the Kingsman clan worsened with every passing day. 3 merchant organizations had decided to wrap up their operations from within Dombivli while 17 had suspended operations. With the enemy not allowing any trade to flow, the common citizens were starting to notice the immediate effects as the local markets were quickly depleted from imported goods and only had local products on display. While Dombivli did have the ability to sustain itself long-term, with both agriculture and natural resources abundant on the planet, they could not flip the pivot immediately. Being reliant on imports for critical industries like iron and cooking oil, while they did have iron reserves on the planet, they could not simply increase production overnight. It took time to establish facilities and increase yield, whereas agricultural crops needed 3.6 months to mature, and being in the middle of the current crop cycle, they could not be suddenly swapped for other forms of produce. The quality of life of the common people had begun to be affected, as although they were living inside an open planet with open skies, they psychologically felt like they were inside a prison, knowing that enemy ships patrolled their planetary borders. According to the current economic and social setting, the internal ministers expected the matter to reach boiling point around the 3-month mark, unless the deadlock was broken. Meanwhile, inside the Kingsman Palace, damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Farid screamed as he punched the wall hard, breaking a chunk of the brick. With the growing troubles, a lot of subordinates loyal to him had started to turn rebellious. His position as a visionary leader was being questioned as he was being made into the scapegoat of the current crisis. Farid knew that if he wanted to usurp the throne from Roy, he needed to become the hero of the masses. It was exactly for that reason that he assumed control of the army and decided to deal with Raven, as he knew that if he could defeat the rising star of the vampire clan, his prestige would soar and he would be able to usurp the throne. Now that everything was going downhill, Farid had to deal with the consequences of his ambition, as instead of Roy's incompetence being blamed, it was his head on the guillotine. Most of Farid's anger stemmed not from making bad military decisions. It stemmed from the fact that he made a small wrong decision at the start. He should have known Raven was a genius and let Roy deal with him, and when he failed, which he was bound to do, he could have usurped the throne without any troubles. But now he was stuck inside the mess and needed to clean up after himself, with the immediate problem to solve being that of the trade routes. A good 47% of the highest income population of Dombivli were merchants. With their business directly attacked, their kind feelings towards the army were starting to vanish. While they were patient for now, if the situation was not resolved soon, Farid was sure in his mind that there would be bad consequences for him. About 150,000 people were directly related to the trade profession and about 450,000 more were indirectly linked. With so many people being put out of job, riots were a real possibility. Just as Farid was brainstorming for a solution, his subordinate walked into the room with an urgent message. Sir, a new merchant ship has managed to dock on the ports. They claim to have found a secret pathway that bypasses the rebel security. Their leader wishes to talk to someone in power to negotiate the price of trade. The subordinate's words were like music to Farid's ears, who could not believe his lucky stars that some daring merchant actually found a way around rebel security. Take me to meet him, this is a matter of national importance, Farid said in a nervous voice as he could barely contain his excitement. It seemed like things were finally taking a turn for the better. At the ship docking bay, are you the merchant who found a new route bypassing the rebel patrol? Farid asked as he sized up the human in front of him. Christian Grey was smoking a cigarette as he wore extremely fashionable earthen suit. He calmly extended his hand for a handshake from Farid as he tossed his cigarette aside. Taking a moment to blow the last bit of smoke out, he smiled with his dazzling white teeth and said, Christian Grey, pleasure to meet you. By slowing down the conversation and making the other party wait, Christian gained the upper hand in the conversation as his calm persona coupled with his confident charm gave a bright first impression to anyone who met him. How did you bypass them? We the Kingsmen have ruled this space for over 1,500 years, how did we not find this route? But you did. Farid asked curiously as he did not wish to trust the enemy blindly. Christian Grey laughed. He knew this question would be the first one that the authorities would ask as he came prepared. The difference between you and me is that you view space as 3 dimensions, I view it as 4. Christian said as he raised his eyebrows in a cheeky smile. He gave a very vague answer that could be translated in a million ways, and while it made a lot of sense, it also did not make any sense, throwing the enemy into confusion. Mr. Grey, name your price for telling us this new route. Even if it's 5 billion gold coins, we shall pay you immediately. Farid said as he revealed his hand in the negotiations. It's a great offer, but unfortunately the secrets of the 4th dimension are a core secret of my merchant ships. Even 100 billion is not enough for me to sell those. Instead, I propose a happy partnership. I'll bring you any goods you want, export any products you like. I'll become your nationalized trading company, where all the merchants under you only have to post their products to me, and I shall deliver them to their destinations and bring them into the city. Doing so I take all the risk, and naturally I also take some of the profits, Christian said as he made the Kingsman clan an offer that they were hard-pressed to refuse. An intense discussion ensued over the next 12 hours regarding Christian's proposition, but after pressure from the merchant's end, it was passed and a system contract was signed between Christian Grey and the Kingsman clan. For every small ship that he provided, Christian charged 100,000 gold coins as a one-way fare, while he charged 1.2 million for large ships. Maintaining a fleet of 130 ships, Christian expected to make about 35 million gold coins a day on average, which meant that if the trade continued smoothly for 3 or so months, he would stand to gain 3.1 billion gold coins from this deal overall. These 3 or so billion were from transportation fees alone. He had also received a local trading license and could make additional profits from selling products, all at the cost of bearing little to no risk. This time he had truly struck rich by possibly earning over 1 billion gold/month, all thanks to his childhood friend Max Rajput. ////A/N. Chapter 13 of 40, A New Day ///. Chapter 372 Preparations begin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2.5 months later, Christian had managed to completely gain the trust of the Kingsman clan as he was hailed as a hero by the common people and especially the merchants for his daring trade techniques. He had completed 100% of the transactions he was assigned and had came out as a reliable and trustworthy partner in these times of crisis. For Farid, he was a lifeline who kept his position as the commander-in-chief intact, as he made sure to give Christian a lot of benefits to keep him roped close. Through his intimate ties with the merchant circle, Christian Grey was able to offload a lot of products at higher margin, making a sizable supplementary income other than the transport services that he provided, and was also able to gain secret intelligence about military contracts and inflow of defense parts that Severus had no access to. In the end, while the Kingsman clan thought they had bypassed the worst crisis, the reality of the situation was that they were being fattened up like a sacrificial lamb for slaughter. On their end they genuinely believed that the Paredes army was distressed about the new trade route via which Christian Grey smuggled goods, as the leaks and information made it seem like it was the source of Raven's biggest headache. In Christian's heart, business was so good that he did not wish for this arrangement to stop anytime soon, but unfortunately for him, he had already been given notice. The day for war was drawing near. Exactly 2 weeks from now he needed to fulfill his obligation to Max and help his men infiltrate Dombivli city. Meanwhile Max studied the reports and finally began having the necessary confidence to win the upcoming war. Max's current total army strength was about 550,000 troops. He needed to leave about 150,000 of them to maintain order on the 4 planets that he controlled, with the majority of them stationed at the Paredes capital. Max had slowly started to withdraw troops from the Green Soil planet, as by the next 2 weeks he planned on completely abandoning that planet and restoring its status quo as a St. Maximus planet. As per his agreement with Sam, he would continue to develop an urban city there bearing all expenses. However, needing all the soldiers he had at his disposal, he intended to pull out every last one of them. Hence, after everything was said and done, Max had about 400,000 men at his disposal for the war on Kingsman Planet against about 500,000 Kingsman clan warriors. His side was down about 100,000 men and would be attacking areas with well-established defensive formations. However, despite this clear disadvantage, Max was confident to win the fight because of two major reasons. The first reason was that currently he had 250 Tier 4 warriors enlisted in his army, a force much larger than the Kingsman clan's 150. This meant that creating openings amongst enemy defensive formations through powerful spells would not be a big issue. The second reason was that initially there were 5 Tier 5 warriors inside the Kingsman clan, with 2 of them dying under Max's hands. They now only had 3. Max was confident in dealing with these 3, as if his strength alone was not enough, he still had his clone to back himself up or have his clone summon Angakok. Computing all these factors in, he was finally prepared for war. In the back of his mind, Max knew that if he waited 2.3 more months, he could amass larger forces and have better odds of victory. He absolutely had no need to rush this fight since he was in control, but he also knew that his back was against the wall. There were a lot of wolves eyeing this conflict, and if Max did not establish his control over the region swiftly, he had genuine worries that some third party would get involved in this war. The second reason was that the war-time salary of soldiers was much higher than peacetime salaries. To maintain a force of 550,000 without having an economic powerhouse like Dombivli City under control, was a humongous expense, and Max did not have the ability to sustain it for much longer. Both these reasons combined, Max was forced to make the decision to fight a little earlier than he was completely comfortable to do. Meanwhile, Cervantes and Augustus, Angakok has begun to stir. My sources say he has a new chosen 1-inch, Augustus one night said as he moved a chess piece. Memphitos has also become active in the Kingdom of Dreams. Surely not a coincidence. Cervantes replied as he moved his piece, these ancient gods who were silent since the Chaos-era war have stirred again when there is new chaos brewing. Perhaps they too understand that a massive conflict is bound to happen in the next few years and everyone will be forced to participate. The universe has a history of repeating itself, and I think that after 50-100 years it's come to a full cycle. The council established an unbiased AI queen to ensure that there be peace, but with the queen's neutrality broken, the seeds of discord have been down, Augustus said as he moved the queen piece on his chessboard with great amusement. Check, he said. Cervantes thought carefully about his words, then said, this war, it's both a curse and a boon. If we manage to win, then the universe won't be divided in 2 factions anymore. There will no longer be a dark faction. That will bring true peace. Cervantes moved his king piece away from Augustus's queen, averting the check. If we lose, there won't be a light faction, Augustus said, reminding Cervantes that the converse was also true. Check. Cervantes studied the board and realized he was helplessly cornered as he admitted defeat and shook the hand of the old fogey. In terms of chess, he was the best player the emperor had ever faced. Regardless, the only thing that's true is that the one-night monarchy and the Hazel Groove monarchy will stand together against the dark, Cervantes said with a hopeful expression. Indeed, Augustus confirmed with a smile as Cervantes sighed. In the upcoming war, the only 3 nations that could be truly trusted were True Elite's kingdom, the Hazel Groove Empire and the one-night monarchy. ////A/N. Chapter 14 of 40. Today seems hard ///. Chapter 373. The Mystery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rudra's POV. As Rudra was refining his body and spirit in the vast cosmos of nothingness, his mind finally seemed to land on a conclusion that was otherwise constantly shrouded with mystery. It seemed to be an unending process of reaching the destination only to be misled and have to start again. If he were not already a Tier 8 monarch with the power of the Tier 10 Chaos Seed at his disposal, he would have never been able to come to this conclusion in the first place. It felt to him like he had been asleep ever since he became conscious, and that it was only today, under the power of the Seed of Chaos, that he had arrived at this secret. Rudra had often wondered why the strongest existences in the universe were only at Tier 8, but there did exist a few unique treasures at Tier 9 and 10. If there was a Tier 9, why had no living individual ever reached it till now? Why did the monarchs who had pursued power and promotion all their life, suddenly lose their thirst for improvement and did not try and push themselves to Tier 9? He had often thought about these matters, but had never realized that the truth about this matter ran much deeper than anyone could have ever anticipated. If he had not been isolated in the cosmos, training his mind daily, making it sharper in an attempt to stay sane, he would have probably never found the time to push against the power of the mental fog covering up this secret. It was only today that Rudra realized that someone at Tier 9 or 10 had carefully created the most effective restriction possible on all lower life forms, and it was this restriction that prevented one to ever come to the conclusion that Rudra had realized today. Ha 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 ha, Sigma is a game. It's all a game to them. I was playing this game since the day I was born. I was but an NPC. Rudra began to laugh hysterically as the last bit of fog surrounding his brain finally dissipated against the power of the chaos energy. Ever since the day any life form was born and started to gain sentience, it was its environment that started to code it into an NPC. As a child, Rudra was taught to identify the different colors. Never did he question why blue color was called blue or why red was called red, no matter how hard he struggled to rename a color. As long as the people around him recognized that object by a certain name, he was bound to use its correct name for communication. While it seemed to be a basic trait necessary for having a language, it was actually a sort of programming. If he was a gaming developer and inside the game world that he was creating he coded every single NPC to identify blue as red, then even if he introduced a single player inside such a setting who knew the truth, over time he would have to accept the setting of blue being red, because such was the norm of the world he was in. Ever since one began having thoughts, they were started to be programmed, started to be taught the ways of the universe, and by the time they were at Tier 4, that programming became so deep-rooted that it became a part of their existence. There was a voice inside everyone, a voice that told them what was right and what was wrong. A voice that urged them to be lazy and indulge in their pleasures, and another that told them to work hard, but all these voices were a reflection of one's programming. The space that one called their conscience was nothing but the area where their code was stored. Listening to the lazy voice was considered a weakness by society. Those who listened to it and procrastinated a lot usually never amounted to much in life. Listening to the hardworking voice was promoted. It was viewed as an essential component to being successful. What one did not understand, however, was that regardless of which voice they heard, they were all playing the game by the rules of the higher-ups, and regardless of being hardworking or lazy, they would all end up amounting to nothing more than being specks of dust in the NPC history. There was a deep-rooted fear in society against one typical kind of individual. An individual who did not adhere to the confines of the general programming, as that person was ostracized and labeled as crazy. This kind of individual listened to her own decisions and did not adhere to the programming, often creating miracles that existed outside the scope of the game. There was a saying in human history, only madness can set you free. It was a saying that Rudra had never found more true than today, as he realized that the true path to becoming Tier 9 was to reject the coding of the system and step beyond it. To become Tier 2, one needed to be competent as an individual. To become Tier 4, one needed to transform the limits of the mortal body and stop relying on energy solely produced by the body and start using energy of the universe as a substitute. To become Tier 6, one needed to grasp the laws of the universe, become the symbol of a uniqueness. To become Tier 8, one needed to slay a Tier 8 existence and at $#$ at $$ at $#$ at $#$, but to go beyond Tier 8 one needed to reject their entire being, accept that everything they knew was a lie and reconstruct themselves from a blank slate. The best lies were those that were mixed with partial truths, making them indiscernible. What the higher-ups of the universe had done was to weave such a beautiful lie, that it allowed one to grow stronger and grasp secrets of the universe, thinking that whatever they were learning was because of their hard work and good luck, that with sufficient amount of these two traits they would one day reach the top and rule the universe. They became so engrossed in the process of getting stronger that they stopped questioning the right from the wrong, and by the time one became Tier 8 the fog of programming in their brain was so thick that even when they did think in the right direction, because it would contradict an absolute truth that they had known all their lives, they would reject this line of thinking and land back at square zero. The coders of the universe were cruel. They had let everyone believe that they were the main characters of their own story, and that they had their own free will, when everyone without an exception including the monarchs were just an NPC in their game. /////A/N. Chapter 15 of 40, one more to go /////. Chapter 370 For the night before the war you are listening at novelfull.audio. Dombivli City. Walking through Dombivli City's teleportation gate was Benedict de Vinorum. The man who faced defeat at the hands of Max back on Earth. Ever since his loss against Max he had been obsessed with seeking revenge and had worked extremely hard to raise his strength to Tier 4 and try and seek revenge against Max. He was the rising star of humanity before his downfall began, as he thoroughly blamed Max for his fall from grace. He had shown up in Dombivli City with one clear purpose, which was to participate in the upcoming war and wait for his chance to launch a sneak attack on Max. With a bounty of 25 million gold coins placed on his head by the Kingsman clan, Benedict not only wanted to kill him, but also become rich in the process. Benedict knew that within the next 1.6 months a war should embroil Dombivli and he planned on waiting patiently till that fateful day came. "Even if I die, I won't let you live," Benedict murmured as he found a room inside a motel and lodged in. To kill Max he had secured a secret weapon which guaranteed the death of a target while being fueled by the user's soul force. It was Benedict's last resort, as using it would not leave him alive to tell the tale, but he was still willing to use it if his back was against the wall. Such was his hate for Max. Meanwhile Max, "This is it guys, we have already procured all the basic weaponry and potions we need for this war. Our plan is set, our ships are fueled, our men are trained and their morale is high. I think we are ready to start the fight tomorrow," Max said as he stared at the complicated drawings on the city map of Dombivli. For the last 3 days, he was constantly analyzing war tactics alongside his group, and after a lot of critical thinking they finally had a detailed plan of action. "The Kingsman clan are dastardly, Roy doesn't deserve to be a lord, I think us winning this war will do more good to the commoners than the Kingsman winning will do. Since we are on the nobler side of this fight, I'm sure the gods will help us win," Anna commented as Sebastian immediately scoffed. "You should know better than anyone Anna, just how gods really are. They are not noble and surely not on the right side of history. If we win tomorrow we shall win for Asiva, for the injustices that she has suffered at their hands. If we win tomorrow we shall win because of Severus's scouting. If we win tomorrow we shall win because of Max's strength and planning. If we win tomorrow it will be because of the blood that my sword shall spill. If we win tomorrow it will be because of the destruction your arrows will bring. If we win tomorrow, it will because the cowardice is with us," Sebastian said as he looked into Max's eyes and smiled. "May the cowardice be with you," the duo said at once, as they shook hands like gentlemen. Knock knock a knock interrupted Max's moment of bromance with Sebastian, as Asiva quickly hid the war plans and said, "Come in." Christian Grey walked into the room wearing a concealer mask and a hood as he scanned the room slowly before locking his eyes on the clone Max, who sat in the corner of the room. The clone chuckled as he waved his fingers at Christian in acknowledgement of his presence but did not get up to exchange greetings. "Hello Captain Raven," Christian Grey eventually said as he tried to approach Max. However, his advance was stopped by an invisible force. "It's okay Zippo. He's a friend," Raven muttered as Christian Grey felt his shadow leave his body as his freedom of movement was restored. Christian was bewildered as he scanned the room, but found no traces of the invisible man. Being a Tier 1 human, his detection abilities were not enough to see through a powerhouse like Zippo. "Thanks to your cooperation Captain, I've made quite the fortune. It's regrettable that this partnership is coming to an end so soon," Christian said, as he recovered quickly from his stupor. "Well, all good things have to come to an end You have enjoyed it enough for the last 3 months, now it's time to pay the price. Raven spoke as Christian nodded. 120 ships, capable of carrying a total of 250,000 soldiers, are only 5 minutes away from the Paratus capital, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Whenever I receive the signal from you or Max, I shall arrive immediately, Christian said as Raven nodded solemnly. All preparations on our side are complete as well. Prepare for takeoff in 6 hours, Raven said as he purposefully glanced towards the clone, Max, for approval. The clone nodded, playing along in this game of charades which kept Christian guessing as to who was the real boss between the two. Unable to figure it out, he could only smile helplessly as he said, "Well, see you around, Maxie. Goodbye, Captain. You have a lovely girlfriend." Asiva smiled brightly at the praise as her impression of Christian improved significantly. However, considering that the war was going to start in 6 hours, the overall atmosphere in the room remained quite solemn. This war was not going to be easy and everyone was going to be tested to their very limits. The outcome of the war was extremely important for all members of the group for various reasons, but all the more so for Max, for whom this was the start of his journey to become king. Although they had prepared sufficiently, victory was not a certainty and there was a huge risk of losing one's life. Win or lose, tomorrow was going to be the biggest and most important fight in the group's history. /////A/N. Chapter 16 of 40, that's it for today. It was undoubtedly hard but somehow we stumbled to success in the end, ////. Chapter 375. It begins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The person leading the first entourage of 250,000 soldiers was Max as Captain Raven. He was going in first alongside Anna and Sebastian, whereas the clone and Asiva were to enter the planet alongside the remaining 150,000 soldiers and the destroyer battleships. The initial plan was simple. Upon landing, the first priority was to gain ground for about 2 blocks as to deactivate all the air defenses in those areas and destroy the mage tower built near the ship docking area. Once these targets were destroyed, the rest of the ships would be able to land with relative ease and the war could begin at full swing. Max, who was sitting in a small merchant ship with about 2,000 troops, Anna and Sebastian fiddled with his green-winged angel pendant as he prayed to Hazriel in his head. To Max, Hazriel was the only god worth believing in as he had first-hand experienced how noble and kind-hearted she was. "Captain, we shall arrive inside Dombivli in 3 minutes, we are beginning atmospheric descent now," the merchant pilot responsible for the ship's transportation reported as Max buckled up for a bumpy descent. Unlike the destroyer ships which were unaffected by atmospheric turbulence, the merchant ships were quite pitiful. They rocked around violently and often faced the risk of entering a spinning spiraling motion, having to depend completely on the skill of the pilot to prevent such situations from arising. Thankfully, Christian Grey's pilots were sufficiently experienced and landed all 120 ships on the Dombivli docking port with relative ease. Once the ships reached land, cooling gas was released quickly to reduce the scorching hot temperature of the ship's exteriors before the load flap was finally opened. Only when they landed safely and Max scanned the area to make sure there was no immediate ambush in place did he release a big sigh and smile. This plan was extremely risky, and had Christian turned out to be a turncoat playing a double game, all Max could do to survive was to use the teleportation stone on Sebastian to exit the planet alongside Anna. Thankfully, it did not come to that and Christian did not double-cross him. "Christian, you bastard, you actually came through," Max thought as he could feel the hot blood pumping strongly in his veins, urging him to give in to the bloodlust. "Men, this is it. Time to take what's ours, let's go," Max said with conviction as he gripped his runic bone staff and charged outside the ship ready for war. "Rea ar noise, more noise," the rebel forces shouted as they charged out of their ships and flooded the docking area, taking the nominal security forces present by storm as a conflict suddenly erupted. The Kingsman forces, who had grown accustomed to Christian Grey's ships, never imagined that it would be a Trojan horse harboring rebel forces. They looked aghast as they tried to retreat and flee for their lives, but were mercilessly slaughtered by the rebel forces. 2 minutes later, city-wide alarms began blaring as a mandatory curfew was announced and military officials started to mobilize to the streets. An atmosphere of panic and horror ensued as the message was quickly spread. Captain Raven had arrived with his forces. Meanwhile Benedict was peacefully eating lunch inside the motel, thinking how the vampires had no understanding of how much salt in food was too much salt when he heard the blaring alarms. Benedict raised an eyebrow. He had not even been to the city for 2 full days and the rebels had already attacked. This was much faster than he had ever anticipated. Benedict looked at the aghast face of the motel owner who began scrambling to take down his expensive cutlery from the display to safety as he requested Benedict to return to his room at once. Benedict chuckled as he paid for his meal, before calmly walking out of the motel door in a clear violation of the curfew laws. "Sir, you cannot do this, the military will arrest or kill you." The motel owner warned Benedict, but the man believed himself to be the main character of a revenge novel and did not pay any heed to the motel owner's advice. "Shut up, go tend to your cutlery," Benedict said coldly as he began sprinting towards the docking area from where he could see smoke rising and loud noise incoming. He had not even sprinted for a full 100 meters when a passing military squadron noticed him running on the streets and redirected their attention to him. "It's a human, kill him." The Kingsman vampires concluded within seconds as Benedict felt aghast as to why he was not even given a chance to speak. 5 attack spells landed at the location he was standing, as he had to perform 3 backflips to avoid getting hit by the blast. I'm with you, I just want to help," Benedict scrambled to explain, as in his mind this was not how things were supposed to play out. He was supposed to become a hero of the Kingsman clan after killing Max. He was supposed to be hailed by the military and not chased by them. However, the reality of the situation was quite different from his imagination. "Don't trust humans, they are a lying species. He looks ugly and has the face of a liar. I absolutely do not trust him. Kill him." The vampire captain said to his squad as he absolutely did not fall for Benedict's words. Benedict did not understand whether to laugh or to cry, as instead of reaching the docking area where the war was ongoing he was forced to run away from the site of war as he was hotly being pursued by a vampire unit. Soon, his pursuers increased from 1 unit to 3 as his situation turned truly pitiful. Even before getting a glance of Max, he had to expend half his stamina bar and a quarter of his mana bar, just to try and stay alive in a hostile city. A/N. Chapter 17 of 40, A New Day /////. Chapter 376 Blowing Apart Enemy Defenses. You're listening at novelfull.audio. Max watched patiently as his fireblast reduced a helpless Tier 1 soldier to ashes. He was not even exerting 1% of his true strength at the moment, as he was waiting for the corresponding military authorities to arrive before taking action. Unlike popular belief tainted by war movies which showed wars as a constant state of intense fighting where each fighter needed to give their 100% to survive, a war was actually much more like a marathon. One needed to fight continuously for long hours and had to consider the pace at which they were burning themselves out. Special attacks needed to be used at special occasions only, as more often than not an attack on cooldown could be the difference between life or death. Since there was no worthy opponent who had responded to the emergency call and appeared on the front lines yet, Max decided to be pretty chill and conserve his energy. Currently, his men had successfully subdued all enemy forces within the docking bay area and were rapidly moving towards Housing District 13. The initial goal was to cross Housing Districts 13 and 11 to reach the Mage Tower capable of dealing serious ground-to-air damage and disable it before the other ships could enter. As Max surveyed his surroundings in District 13 he could finally see why there was no rush by the enemy forces to restrain them at the docking bay, as they had created really well-established defensive positions all around the housing districts in anticipation of the war. At a distance of every 4.5 houses, there was an archer duo standing ready on the terrace with a small cover from return fire, dealing aerial damage to rebel forces. On the ground, they had placed wooden pikes, stemming from holes in the ground and bags of sand to create strong defensive positions. Should they eventually be in a desperate need to retreat, they had planted explosives at necessary intervals to create a channel for retreat. It was a perfect defensive encampment of sorts, which the rebel army was sure to face trouble with. Max noticed how one of his advance units at the very front got slaughtered within seconds as they tried to approach a roadblock manned by 15 enemy soldiers. The unit consisting of 50 rebel soldiers lost 5 men to archer shots and 10 via the ground troops attacks, even before they could reach the defensive blockades. In the short fight that lasted 3 minutes, all 50 of them got butchered without a single death on the enemy side. Max sighed. This war was going to be much harder than he had anticipated, as the preparations on the Kingsman side were really thorough. Ednel.co, sir. Should we let the Tier 4 warriors take charge now? I don't think we can afford to lose too many men to sniff out their hidden cards, Abu asked Max as he nodded. There are 7 major roads leading into District 13, divide the Tier 4 warriors evenly amongst 6 paths. I'll personally lead the 7th, Max said as he began compressing an inferno spell as he jogged towards the enemy roadblock. Easy men, follow me, Max said as he gave a boost of confidence to the units who were reluctant to approach, as under his lead they marched on boldly, having faith that the captain will create an opening for them. Swoosh swoosh. Max practically did not even move as he dodged the weak archer shots with no problems at all, before launching the compressed inferno spell from point-blank range. Buffer, a loud flickery sound of fire could be heard city-wide as Max wiped out 3 enemy roadblocks at once with a single attack, clearing the entire street for up to 200 meters ahead. At least 100 Kingsman soldiers lost their lives under this blast, but the loss of morale was even more severe as they could not believe their eyes at the ease at which the enemy blew apart their defenses. The rebel forces cheered as they charged through the opening rapidly, while butchering the poor archers on the rooftop who had nowhere left to run. A similar situation enveloped the entire 7 entrances of District 13 as a clear message was sent to the Kingsman army, that if they wished to hold on to their encampments and draw out a fight, they needed to start sending out their best Tier 4 warriors to the front. As unless they did so, their petty tricks would prove useless in stopping the advance of the rebel army. Meanwhile Roy and Farid, under the blaring alarms, the royal guards all flocked towards Roy Kingsman and provided ultimate security to him in fears of an enemy assassin trying to sneak in and kill him, as Farid entered his chambers to seek an audience. How did this happen? Why was no airstrike triggered? How can they land undetected to our soil? Roy asked Farid with an aghast expression as the commander-general of the Kingsman army felt ashamed of himself for letting this situation develop as such. They have hijacked the grey merchant ships, and sneaked in as cargo, that we were caught off guard, Farid confessed as Roy seemed to be delving into hysteria as he feared an imminent threat to his life. Roy's eyes widened as he clutched the corners of his bed tightly while biting the bedsheet. Don't worry, nephew, this is what we exactly wanted. The enemy only has 250,000 troops, while we have 500,000. We have great confidence in winning this war, we have prepared well for it. After today this problem will be solved for once and for all, Farid said as he tried to calm Roy down. Bring me his head, uncle. Roy said as he looked into Farid's eyes with a hint of madness, giving chills to the veteran. I will, my lord, Farid said as he put on his metal helmet and walked out of the room ready for war. /////A/N. Chapter 1820, I'm on a roll today, ////. Chapter 377 Reliable Guard. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It took Max and his forces about 1 hour to completely wipe out the Kingsman clan from District 13, as they moved on to District 11 in the Mage Tower. In this first bout of exchange, Max had lost about 7,500 men, whereas the Kingsmen had lost about 20,000. The first round definitely went to the rebel forces who took the enemy by surprise, but things became extremely complicated once they entered District 11. The enemy had studied the attack patterns of the invaders and had figured out that their immediate target was the Mage Tower, hence they were well prepared for the face-off by the time the rebels reached District 11. The Tier 4 warriors on the side of the Kingsman clan, who were missing from action in the first few hours of the bout, finally started to make an appearance as they reinforced the weaker fighters and tried to protect each roadblock. It was now that the nitty-gritty, pound-for-pound real battle broke out, as the fighting started to turn truly ugly. Max was targeted heavily, as his presence on the battlefield brought a lot of Tier 4 fighters to deal with him at once. While on the other fronts, the rebels outnumbered the defending forces in terms of Tier 4 warriors. On Max's end, he was fighting a 1 versus 4 battle with some of the finest enemy soldiers. Fireblast, summon netherbeasts, Max spammed an attack, before rolling on the ground to dodge an incoming sword strike as he summoned his netherbeasts to level the playing field. Max was facing a difficult battle as he faced 3 swordsmen and 1 mage altogether. Benoel them, although he was faster than the swordsmen, making them individually harmless, their collective efforts forced Max to expend significant amounts of energy on dodging. The mage tried to continuously disrupt Max's rhythm with spells, as he made sure that Max received no chance to counterattack. Once the netherbeasts arrived on the battlefield, Max redirected them all towards the mage, as he knew that should the mage be eliminated, he would get the opening he needed to deal with the other 3. Fireblast, 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 Dragon's Breath, .45000 Max spammed Fireblasts to force a single swordsman to break formation, as he pushed him against a brick wall, before surprising him with a Dragon's Breath attack. The enemy had never expected Max to suddenly breathe fire from his mouth, and was taken by surprise as the attack gave him severe burn damage, before burning a hole through the household brick wall behind him and sending him crashing into the civilian's home. Max winced as he heard the shrieks of the civilian lady who was scared out of her wits to see the scene, but unfortunately there was nothing he could do about it for now. Whistle, bite off his leg, boy, Max said as he commanded his beast to bite the mage's leg off, as one of the swordsmen had to divert his focus from facing Max to saving his teammate. This left only 1 swordsman to face Max, as he leisurely weaved through his barrage of attacks, before placing a finger on his nose as he looked into his eyes point-blank and said, boom, blood manipulation, blood explosion. Max controlled the target's internal blood pressure as he urged the capillaries to blast. As the tier of the target and himself was equal, he could not immediately kill him, however, with his expertise in the area he made sure to damage critical veins as the opponent suffered from dangerous internal bleeding. The soldier shrieked in pain, as blood dripped from his eyes and his nose. He began rapidly losing vision as he felt like his whole body was being internally filled up by some liquid. I'm going blind. I'm going blind. The soldier screamed in terror, however, there was nothing that could be done to save him. Max had already destroyed the small capillaries in his eyes, and he was already a gone case. At this instance Max felt a little melancholic. The human inside him told him that this form of cruelty was wrong, that he could have killed the opponent in 100 ways that were more merciful and did not have to stoop so low. However, although his conscience was guilty, his instincts as a primordial vampire only smelled the scent of the enemy's blood revitalizing his very being, as his instincts did not tell him that he did anything wrong. While he was in this dilemma, he momentarily forgot that the soldier he had blasted into the household was only injured and not dead, as using the opportunity, he attacked Max from behind in a sneak attack. Max's way of the wind instinct alerted him, however, even if he turned this second, he would only receive a blow to the front of his body rather than his back, while there was no way for him to evade the attack either, since the enemy already had considerable velocity and could trace his movements. Fuck. Max thought as he prepared himself to take some damage, but just as he imagined that the sword would pierce his body, he heard a loud thud sound as he turned to see that the enemy was shockingly pulled into the solid road up to his waist, unable to move a single centimeter. Thanks Zippo, Max commented as he stomped the struggling soldier's head into the ground before repeatedly bashing it with brute force with his bone staff. It was a crude way of killing an opponent, but since it did not expend any mana it was quite economical in a war. To create this opening, Zippo had stepped in at the critical moment and prevented the enemy from injuring Max. While this was a slip on Max's part, it was reassuring for him to know that he had a powerful ally protecting his back at such critical times. Grinning from ear to ear, he silently thanked Aunt Rhea for the additional security as it did make his life easy in a war. // Chapter 19 of 40, almost through day 5, let's go. // Chapter 378 Severus is back. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By the time Max finished off the 3 swordsmen, the mage had managed to kill all 15 of his nether beasts, as it was now a one-on-one for Max against the mage. The mage class as a whole was a very difficult class to play, especially at the lower tiers. The abilities one had as a tier 1 or tier 2 mage was extremely limited. For a class that was designed to be extremely effective for PvE combat and have considerably AoE abilities, the tier 1 and tier 2 mage did not have the necessary powerful spells to live up to the mage's reputation. However, everything started to change from tier 4. A tier 4 mage was a powerhouse, every spell he could conjure was lethal, and when given enough time to prepare, a tier 4 mage could prepare high damage spells that could change the tide of a war. Usually, for any organization, a tier 4 mage was considered a much more valuable member than a tier 4 swordsman, because of his ability to handle multiple enemy targets at once. One thing that did not change with increase in tiers for a mage, however, was the disadvantage it faced in close-ranged fights. Unless a mage had perfect mastery over his spells, he needed 0.1.10 seconds of activation time depending on the spell he wanted to conjure. Such long activation times meant that when the mage faced continuous barrage of close-ranged assaults, she would become helpless to defend against it. To prevent such a situation, most mages had protective items to raise their defenses, or short-range teleportation spells within their arsenal to make sure that they could always maintain a proper distance from their enemy. Max's current enemy also had the teleportation spell, as whenever Max tried to close in the distance between himself and the mage, the latter would teleport away and run like a coward. "Stop running, you! If you have drunk your mother's milk as a baby, come fight me like a man," Max roared in irritation as he wished to anger the mage into a fight. Not falling for his provocation, however, the mage successfully retreated from Sector 11 as his exit was covered by various archers who did not let Max complete the chase. The war was sure to be a long one, and the mage did not want to die at the enemy hands so early. Since his fellow tier 4 swordsmen were dead, he preferred to retreat and fight another time. A truly wise decision. Meanwhile Severus slowly slid onto the battlefield. Initially, he too was affected by the curfew, however, unlike Benedict, he was actually aware about every nook and cranny of the city as he used hidden alleys to reunite with the rebel army. The sector he popped up from had Sebastian taking on 2 vampires twice his size, as the little dwarf finally shined and displayed his true worth by killing both of his opponents in a short and clean bout. As a veteran having witnessed many fights, Severus had a certain degree of admiration for Sebastian's swordsmanship. His moves were clean without the loss of any excess energy, but still nimble and lethal. There was no doubt in Severus's mind that Sebastian was an incredibly talented swordsman, and had he not been corrupted by the demon and was still a human, he would become one of the most formidable fighters in the universe. Not only did he have Thor's battle senses, his training with Kremeth made him an extremely balanced fighter. "Hola," Severus said as he tapped gently on Sebastian's shoulder, who immediately swung his sword in horror, trying to chop the head off the person who tapped on his shoulder. "Bloody hell, son, it's me, Severus," he clarified as Sebastian stared at him speechless, with his right eye fluttering as while he wished to express immense anger he had no words to properly convey it. "For the millionth time, don't sneak up on people and greet them normally," Sebastian shouted in anger as he tried to calm his rapidly beating heart. When Severus tapped on his shoulder, he felt his heart come up to his throat as he thought he was surely a goner. Thankfully it was Severus and not an enemy. Severus pulled out his iron cleaning broom at this moment before banging it hard on the head of a charging Kingsman clan soldier as he said, "I thought you would be happier than this to see me." Sebastian ignored his words, as he focused on his fight, taking down 2 more opponents with his swordsmanship before turning towards Severus as he said, "I'm happy, just don't pull this shit off on me again, my nerves are on the edge in this war." Severus nodded, he had become so excited to see Sebastian that he forgot that this was not the best time for practical pranks. "Where is Captain Raven?" Severus eventually asked. "The street to the left of here is Anna, the street even more to the left is Raven." Circle around the back to reach there, the front is covered by enemies, Sebastian answered as he parted ways with Severus. It was clear that the scientist/sweeper was only interested in meeting Max at the moment and had no inclinations about staying with Sebastian to help. Alright, any message you want to give him? Severus asked before he left as Sebastian grinned at the question. Sebastian was having the time of his life in this war, as his EXP gauge was filling up fast. Having given up on the path of the perfect warrior, Sebastian was only waiting for his EXP bar to max out before he could promote himself, and his plan in this war was to accomplish this one goal. Tell him, I won't be behind him for too long, that I'm coming in hot. Sebastian said as he turned his bloody fist into a V sign and smiled innocently. Severus took note of the message and sneaked off, as he began navigating his way to where Max was supposed to be. /////A/N. Chapter 2040. We have reached the halfway mark. Thank you everyone who helped me reach this point, half more to go. ////. Chapter 379. Not too bad for a woman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Clearing up Sector 11 was much more difficult than clearing Section 13, and the casualties toll was much higher as well. Max's army was down from the initial 250,000 to 200,000, whereas the Kingsman clan were down from 550,000 to 425,000 soldiers. The Kingsman clan had lost 23 of their 150 Tier 4 fighters, whereas the rebels lost 14 of their 250. The fight was ever so slightly tilted in the favor of the rebels for now, but with 10 sectors and an inner district left to conquer, the city was truly difficult to capture. The Mage Tower at the end of Sector 11 was a nearly 50-story tall building that could be located easily from anywhere inside Dombivli city. It was a structure that was built for Tier 6 archmages to display their true power and was an ancestral building that represented the Kingsman clan's true glory. 700 years ago, an archmage by the name of Graham Smith served the then Kingsman ruler. Will Kingsman's father, during his time, no foreign powers could eye Dombivli city because of the terrifying might of the Mage Tower. An army of a few 100,000 could be squashed like bugs by the archmage without batting an eye. Ever since his death, there was no other mage who was powerful enough to wield the powers of the Mage Tower and cooperate with the Kingsman clan, as the once magnificent structure capable of mass destruction was reduced to an air defense mechanism. Rho-alpha-d-alpha.new, M, the inherent spell powered through inscriptions and runes inside the Mage Tower was called Starlight Tracer. It was a spell that traced any foreign object entering Dombivli's atmosphere and destroyed it with a very strong light-based attack. Each shot of the Starlight Tracer contained the strength of a peak Tier 5 spell and could thoroughly damage even a destroyer-class battleship. Hence, although the Mage Tower without the Archmage was a hollow artifact unable to express its true might, it was still a deterrent for enemy forces who had their sights set on Dombivli. If possible, Max wanted to leave the Mage Tower intact and not destroy it, since it would be an invaluable asset for him once he captured the city. But if the need arose, he had no qualms about destroying it either. I don't wish to destroy your tower, but if you don't deactivate it peacefully, I will be forced to take action, Max said as he threatened the few Tier 4 warriors guarding the entrance to the Mage Tower. You heard him. So now move, bitch. Anna said as she arrived after clearing her lane to the Mage Tower as well, as Max tacitly nodded in her direction acknowledging her presence. You should move. I think the tower has not been properly cleaned for over 500 years, deactivate it so I can do some maintenance work, Severus said as he appeared out of nowhere beside Max, startling the captain of the army. Max frowned. He could not understand why his way of the wind could not detect Severus, but while he was only mildly upset, there was one individual who was even more upset than he was. That individual was Zippo. The Shadow Guard could not believe that his senses were unable to pick up Severus's arrival. The other party's stealth had reached inhuman levels. Ha ha ha. Am I the last one to arrive to the party? Well. No worries, I'll be the first one to cut them bastards down if they don't move. So what will it be? Sebastian said as he arrived at the Mage Tower after clearing his lane as well. Besides the gang, thousands of rebel soldiers also flooded the plaza where the Mage Tower was located, putting immense pressure on the few Tier 4 warriors protecting the structure. I can respect Captain Raven, he is a formidable warrior of the vampire clan. If fate did not pit us against one another, I would be fighting with him against the enemies of the kingdom. However, while I can let his threats slide, I will absolutely not take shit from some puny dwarf, some man who is standing in a battlefield with a fucking broom and a woman. The vampire plated with thick silver armor and huge shield, guarding the entrance to the Mage Tower, said as he made his stance about retreating pretty clear. Well, since you insulted me first, now allow me to dismantle you to pieces, Sebastian said as he charged towards the enemy lines alone, while madly shouting as he trotted with his small legs. He was using his special move, attract attention, as while the Guardian's focus was on his funny-looking charge, Anna was preparing her power shot, as she gathered the strength and took precise aim. Shua Anna let an arrow fly from her now as it traveled at nearly the speed of sound, leaving a buzzing sensation to anyone's ears unfortunate enough to be passed by .220,000 critical hit. That arrow hit the Guardian straight into his right eye as it pierced his eye socket into his brain before coming halfway out of the back of his skull. A critical hit. One that had taken down the full HP bar of the tank to a dangerous red, as the timely attack created an opening for Sebastian to sneak out of his target's vision before appearing above his head to deliver an overhead slash, .120000 critical hit. With just 2 hits, the mighty Tier 4 warrior responsible to hold the enemy lines fell to his miserable death as panic spread fast amongst the Kingsman forces in a scene that Max or any rebel soldier would never forget in their lifetime. They saw Sebastian the dwarf chasing 5 Tier 4 warriors alone while howling as they ran for their lives. Chants of "dwarf and elf are death and danger" could be heard throughout the battlefield, as the morale of the rebel army soared to new heights. Max grinned hearing these chants as he looked back towards Anna, who was smugly dusting off her shoulders as she said, "Not too bad for a woman, eh? /////A/N. Chapter 21 of 40, A New Day, ////. Chapter 380 Problems. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Roalpha.D-Alpha.new, Max walked into the ancient Mage Tower peacefully. He was internally filled with glee that he did not have to destroy this magnificent structure and could calmly disable it. The inside of the tower was lined with countless beautiful runic inscriptions and artificial lightning sources and felt like a world of its own. If it were him alone, he would never figure out in a million years as to how exactly he should disable it, but Drax the aide that I was knowledgeable in this field. During Drax's time as the servant of the Lord of Fire Agni, he often studied and controlled mage towers. There were several mage towers in the god Agni's planet, with the tallest one being over 1 kilometer, which allowed the god of fire to control regions in the entire solar system and not just a single planet. The method to safely disable any mage tower was to remove the mana stones powering its core formation from their place, and that was what Max exactly did as one after another he removed high-grade mana stones from the tower's core formation before storing them safely in his inventory. When Drax gave him the green signal that everything was disabled, he walked back out of the tower and told the troops to deploy the signaling. Within the next 3 minutes, tens of thousands of red flares were shot high into the atmosphere, so much so that even from space a tiny red ball would be visible. This was the signal to the rest of the forces outside the atmosphere to come in and join the battle. Meanwhile it was nerve-wracking for Asiva to wait on the sidelines till she got the signal to descend. Whenever things involved matters such as war and violence, she felt a continuous need to stick around Max to make sure he was okay, as somehow after the death of her father she never felt secure with separating with her loved ones in the face of danger. The 2+ hours of waiting outside the planet's atmosphere felt like 2 days to Asiva, who continuously paced around the ship waiting eagerly for the signal to descend. When the signal finally arrived, she breathed a sigh of relief as she nodded towards the clone Max Rajput, who gave the orders to land. The 5 destroyer ships containing 30,000 soldiers each began descending through the atmosphere, guns at ready as they aimed at District 7 through 3 to target reserve troop lines and healer houses. As they entered the atmosphere, the Kingsman air defense systems were triggered as ground-to-air weapons were deployed to take down the battleships. Many of the ground-to-air weapons supposed to deploy showed signs of malfunction due to Severus's tempering as they exploded before takeoff, or went array into the air. The air above the city also changed rapidly, as she recognized it to be one of Max's moves, the Nature's Whisperer, by which he covered the entire city in a thick fog, making it difficult for one to locate the position of the ships above ground. For the first 30 seconds, the descent was smooth for all ships, as they were soon going to enter a shooting range from where they could rain fire on Districts 7 through 4 without taking blind shots. However, it was at this moment that everything turned south. Asiva saw it in slow motion as the ship to her left was met with a terrifying blast of wind which, as it diced about 30% of the ship off its mainframe, sending it spiraling down to its downfall. Asiva's mind went blank, as she could not react for a second, whereas the clone rushed to the pilot's cabin and shouted for them to force the ship to dip down fast. Under the clone's urging, the ship took a complete descent action as it sped towards ground at full speed, abandoning its position to attack the Kingsman sectors as it focused on survival first. Kaboom! While descending at full speed, the clone heard yet another explosion coming from his right as he could only gasp in horror as a second rebel ship was destroyed before landing. The clone was clear in his mind that there was clearly some external factor at play this time, because in their intel report there was not a single person on the Kingsman clan side which was capable of such violence. The only question now was, who? Max's POV, everything was going smooth for Max until he saw the first ship carved like it was a slice of butter by an attack that was clearly belonging to the Tier 6 realm in power. Max's heart beat out of his chest, as he did not know which one of the 5 ships Asiva was in, and whether she was on the ship who was just attacked. As Max saw a few unfortunate rebel soldiers fall from the sky towards their death, he could not help but clutch his fists in anger as he tried to locate the individual responsible for this attack. Max began to climb the outer walls of the Mage Tower, as he tried to gain elevation to get a better view of the situation, as the moment he raised his head above the layer of fog, he saw a vampire with blonde hair and differently colored eyes floating in the sky as he leisurely prepared his attack spells to bring down the battleships. "It's a god!" Max exclaimed in his head as he tried to skim through his head as to which vampire god had a blue-colored left eye but a red-colored right eye. Unfortunately, Max did not know any such god, or his reason to support the Kingsman clan in this battle, as the only thing he knew was that the bastard had just killed 60,000 of his men and destroyed 2 of his destroyer battleships with a casual flick of his wrists. /////A/N Chapter 22 of 40, On a Roll. //